The emergency room was a whirlwind of frantic energy. The beeping of machines, the shouting of doctors, and the rushed footsteps of nurses filled the sterile air. At the center of it all, a young woman lay on a gurney, her body twitching and jerking uncontrollably. Her skin was pale, her lips tinged with a faint blue. The monitor screamed out her blood pressure, pulse, and heart rate, numbers that fluctuated wildly, signaling the imminent death that no one could understand. Behind the glass, a figure stood unmoving, his broad shoulders squared, his face a mask of military discipline. General Adebayo Grant stood at the threshold of the chaos, his eyes locked on his only daughter, Sophia, her body writhing in agony, his chest tightened with helplessness, the very same power that had always commanded men in battle, now useless in the face of his child's suffering. 22 doctors. His voice cracked as he spoke through glass, the word heavy with frustration and disbelief. And none of you can save her? The bitterness in his tone was clear, but it was the fear in his eyes that betrayed him. For a brief moment, the room went still, and in the deafening silence that followed, a voice cut through the noise, calm and unyielding. Stop. The words hung in the air, freezing everyone in their tracks. A janitor, holding a mop in one hand, walked toward the frenzied group. He wasn't a doctor, wasn't anyone special in the eyes of the hospital staff, but he had seen death before, had walked its shadow in ways few others could comprehend. His name was Ethan Kofi. At 35 years old, his lean, muscular frame was a testament to years of hard work. Deep brown skin marked by the calluses and scars of manual labor, a face hardened by life struggles. Every morning, Ethan rose early in his cramped Arlington apartment. The echoes of his daughter's laughter the only comfort he could count on. Amina, his 8-year-old daughter, would greet him with sleepy eyes and a bright smile as he helped with her ponytail before making breakfast. The days felt long, but they were his, and she was his everything. No one knew that the janitor before them had once been Captain Ethan Kofi, a decorated combat medic who had served 3 brutal tours in Afghanistan. No one knew that he had once been a hero, respected, trusted, and admired. Now, he cleaned the very floors where his dreams had once taken flight, silently watching as the doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, but, in this moment, failed. He could see it in their eyes. They were lost. But he wasn't. Ethan's mind sharpened, focused on the chaos before him. His eyes scanned the patient. Sophia Grant, watching the violent spasms that racked her body. He could smell the faint ammonia in the air, the subtle sign of something gone terribly wrong. He knew what it was before the doctors even began to suspect. Hyponatremia, dangerously low sodium levels, something he'd seen once before, years ago, in the harsh heat of a desert camp, when water contaminated by chemical runoff had caused soldiers to collapse. It had been a memory that had stayed with him. And now it was here again, in the form of the general's daughter, lying on the very edge of life and death. His heart pounded in his chest. It wasn't just a memory of his past that stirred him. It was the oath he had taken as a medic, the vow to save lives, no matter the cost. He had been stripped of his career, his dignity, and his future. But in this moment, none of that mattered. The room was in disarray, and every doctor was scrambling, consulting with one another in confusion. Dr. Jasper Klein, the chief of emergency medicine, barked orders, his frustration mounting. Ethan could see the missteps, the errors, the saline being administered, normal saline, the wrong choice. The faint ridging on Sophia's fingernails, a sign of chronic electrolyte imbalance. The spasms, not from neurological damage, but from the body's desperate need for balance. He could see it all with a clarity that pierced through the panic. Ethan stepped forward, his movement steady, purposeful. Dr. Klein didn't notice him at first, but when he did, he made a sharp turn. "You can't be in here," Klein snapped, his voice harsh with authority. This is a sterile environment. But Ethan's voice was calm, cutting through the tension with quiet assurance. If you keep that drip running, her heart will stop in 3 minutes. The room went deathly silent. Every head turned toward him, some confused, others angry. Ethan's eyes met Dr. Klein's. Her sodium levels are dangerously low. She needs a hypertonic saline solution. 3%. Stop the calcium gluconate. It's pushing her into arrhythmia. Dr. Lila Ames, a young resident, stepped forward, her brows furrowed in confusion. How could you possibly know that? The lab results aren't back yet. Ethan didn't flinch. He had no time to explain himself. Look at her fingernails. See the vertical ridging? Chronic electrolyte imbalance. Her muscle spasms are not neurological. They're electrolyte-driven tetany. And the ammonia on her breath, her kidneys are failing. The tension in the room thickened as Dr. Ames rushed to the computer, her fingers trembling as she pulled up the preliminary lab results. Her face went pale as she read the numbers. "My God! He's right," she whispered, the words sending shockwaves through the entire room. Outside the glass, General Adebayo Grant stepped forward, his posture as rigid as ever, his eyes locked on Ethan's with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. The same man who had destroyed him 5 years ago, now the one who was saving his daughter. "Let him work," Marcus said quietly, his voice low, but with unmistakable authority. The doctors reluctantly stepped back, and Ethan moved with practiced precision. He hung the 3% hypertonic saline and checked the drip rate, making sure it was set correctly. Then, with careful concentration, he placed his fingers below Sophia's collarbone, pressing gently at a precise point. "Vagal maneuver," he explained, his voice soft yet confident. "It will help reset the cardiac rhythm." The seconds stretched on, heavy and still, as Ethan counted silently, feeling the tension build with every passing moment. Sophia's body began to relax. The spasms slowed, the blue tint around her lips began to fade, and her breathing steadied. The monitors that had once been erratic now showed a steady, normal rhythm. The transformation was undeniable. General Grant stood at the window, his arms stiff at his sides. He had always been a man of control, of power. But now, standing there, he was humbled. The daughter he had feared would die had been saved by a janitor, a man whose name he had signed off on, a man he had condemned. Ethan stepped back, his gaze unshaken as he met the general's eyes. "She needs continuous monitoring. Watch for overcorrection," he said softly. "Raising sodium too quickly can cause permanent brain damage." The general's lips parted, a faint tremor of disbelief on his face. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ethan met his gaze. "Because I use to save lives, General Grant. Before you..." The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words as General Adebayo Grant stood frozen in the room, his gaze still locked with Ethan Kofi. The older man's face was a mask of disbelief, the bitter realization of his past mistakes slowly dawning on him. For the first time in years, General Grant, a man who had wielded power with ease, felt completely out of control. His mind raced. How could a man who had once been a hero, respected and honored, end up as a mere janitor? And why? After everything he had done, was this same man the one who had saved his daughter's life? The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan's quiet authority had shattered the frantic, high-stakes atmosphere. His calm, self-assured presence stood in stark contrast to the doctor's chaotic attempts. Sophia was stable for the moment, but Ethan's actions had left more than just a clinical impact. It was a reminder of everything Ethan had lost, of everything he had once been, and of how those in power could easily cast aside those beneath them. Ethan didn't look back at the general as he checked the forward drip, making sure everything was in place. His hands, steady despite the emotional storm brewing in his chest, worked with quiet efficiency. It was his way. Always calm, always methodical. But inwardly, the anger simmered, a heat he had tried to bury for years. The general had ruined his life, but here he was forced to save him, forced to save the daughter of the very man who had cast him aside. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by Dr. Lila Ames, who stepped up beside him, her voice low and hesitant. I don't know how you did it," she said, almost in awe. The young resident was still processing the enormity of what had just transpired. Her eyes were wide with disbelief, but there was something else there, something like admiration, mixed with a trace of guilt. Ethan met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "You just have to trust your instincts," he replied quietly, his voice still steady. "What matters is saving her life, not how it gets done." He glanced over at the still, peaceful face of Sophia, whose spasms had ceased, her breathing now steady and calm. "That's all that matters." General Grant's voice cut through the silence, breaking the fragile moment. His tone was clipped, but his words carried an unexpected weight. "You've saved her life. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this." Ethan didn't flinch. He met the general's gaze, his own eyes dark, filled with years of unspoken hurt and frustration. "You can start by not treating people like they're disposable. You owe me nothing, General Grant. I saved your daughter because it was the right thing to do. That's it." The words hung heavy in the room, and for a moment, the only sound was a steady beep of the heart monitor. General Grant, normally a man of steel, was stunned into silence. The past, the way he had dismissed Ethan's sacrifice all those years ago, came rushing back. It felt like a weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. The hospital room, which had felt so sterile and cold just moments before, now seemed to contain the raw, vulnerable energy of a broken man trying to piece together what had been lost. Ethan, standing at the center of it all, was the key to that reconciliation, both the one General Grant had denied and the one Ethan had long given up on. Sophia's pulse was stable now, but there was still tension in the air. Ethan could feel it, an undercurrent of emotion, something unspoken between him and the general, between him and Sophia's unconscious form. His body ached with the years of bitterness, the years of being overlooked and discarded. Yet he had done it. He had saved her. Outside the room, the news of Ethan's action spread like wildfire through the hospital. His name was whispered with a mixture of awe and shock. The janitor, no, the hero, had done what no one else could. As the whispers grew louder, so did the weight of Ethan's past. He had been a hero once, but now he had to live with the bitter truth that the man who had cast him aside would forever be tied to his redemption. Later that day, as Ethan was preparing to leave, a sharp knock echoed through the hospital hallway. He had known it was coming, but the reality of it still hit hard. The suspension, Dr. Patricia Stevens, the chief medical officer, had been quick to arrange an investigation into his actions, but Ethan knew the truth. She would never clear him, not fully, not when the system had long deemed him irrelevant, unworthy. No matter what he had done, he would always be the janitor in their eyes. Just as Ethan began to leave the hospital, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approached. He turned, surprised to find Dr. Lila Ames waiting for him in the hallway. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft, almost apologetic, "you did something extraordinary in there." She hesitated, eyes darting to the floor for a moment before meeting his gaze. "But I need you to come back. There's more we can do. Please don't leave." Ethan's heart skipped. He had saved Sophia. He had done his duty. But something in Dr. Ames's eyes pulled him back. Something vulnerable, something raw that he had long since buried in himself. She was offering him a chance, a second chance, not just at redemption, but at something far more dangerous, hope. He looked at her, at the quiet compassion she offered, and for the first time in years he felt the stirrings of something Something real, something that he wasn't sure he was ready for. "I've done what I came to do," he said finally, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You don't need me here anymore." Dr. Ames took a step closer, her voice soft but insistent. "We need you, Ethan. You've always been more than just a janitor. Don't let them make you believe otherwise." And just like that, everything changed. Ethan stood there for a long moment, his pulse quickening, unsure of what to do next. His heart, so long dormant, now beat with renewed fire, a fire ignited by the very people who had once condemned him. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension, an unspoken connection between Ethan and Sophia. She had been stabilized, her life saved by the man she knew only as a janitor. Sophia Grant, who had always been shielded by her father's power, now found herself caught in an unexpected moment of vulnerability. The stark contrast between a man who had come from nothing and the privilege she had known her entire life seemed almost absurd. And yet, there was something in his eyes, something so raw and real, that made her long for something deeper. Each day, Ethan found himself unable to ignore the pull between them. He saw Sophia less as a daughter of the man who had destroyed his career, and more as a woman who had experienced her own share of loss and grief. He had saved her life, but there was a quiet connection simmering beneath the surface, an attraction neither could deny. He couldn't explain why her gaze lingered on him a moment longer than necessary, why her voice softened when she spoke his name, why the air between them felt charged, even when they were silent. The weeks after her recovery blurred together as they continued to spend more time together. Drinks after work, quiet dinners, and long conversations that went on until the late hours of the night. Ethan could feel in the way Sophia looked at him, as if her gaze was peeling back the layers of the soul. She didn't see a janitor. She saw him as a man who had once been something more. And she wanted to know who he was, beyond the uniform of a man who scrubbed floors and emptied trash. One night, as they stood outside the hospital in the cool night air, Sophia took a step closer to Ethan, the city lights casting a soft glow around them. There was a palpable tension between them, an energy that hummed in the silence. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low, "about how much you've lost, and how much you've given up." She paused, her eyes searching his. "And I'm sorry." Ethan turned to face her, the weight of his past pressing down on him. The bitterness, the years of resentment, it all flashed in his mind. But there was something in Sophia's eyes, something so genuine, that softened the sharp edges of his anger. "You don't need to apologize," he said quietly. "You didn't make me who I am. I did that to myself." His words hung between them, the air thick with emotions they hadn't dared to voice until now. Sophia stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. The intensity of the moment, the rawness of it, made it hard for Ethan to breathe. The past that had kept them apart seemed to crumble away, replaced by something more urgent, more pressing. "I don't know what this is between us," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "But I feel it, too." The words hung in the air like a promise, and before Ethan could stop himself, his hands found her waist, pulling her closer. The heat between them was undeniable, a magnetic force neither could resist. His heart pounded in his chest as their lips met in a kiss. Slow at first, tentative, but growing more insistent as the tension that had built between them finally erupted. Their kiss was electric, filled with longing and desire. Every touch, every movement was an exploration, a quiet promise of what they could have, of what they could be, if they only allowed themselves the chance. For Ethan, it was more than just physical attraction. It was an overwhelming, emotional connection that he hadn't realized he'd been craving. The years of pain, of loss, and of being overlooked melted away in that moment. He kissed Sophia with a tenderness he hadn't known he was capable of, as to try and make up for every missed opportunity, every moment lost in the past. As they pulled away, Sophia's face flushed, her eyes wide with surprise, but also with something deeper, something unspoken that hung between them. Ethan's hand lingered on her cheek, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. It was just the two of them, caught in a moment of vulnerability, of connection, and of something far more profound. Ethan, Sophia began, but she was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The moment broke like fragile glass. They both turned to see Marcus Grant standing at the edge of the hospital parking lot, his eyes dark with something unreadable. The sight of his father, stoic, commanding, a man who had once been his undoing, brought Ethan back to reality. Sophia, Marcus's voice was calm, but there was a heaviness to it. We need to talk. Sophia pulled away slightly, her face flushed. She glanced at Ethan, then back at her father. The tension in the air was thick, but she didn't move. She didn't say anything either, as if she had no idea what to do or how to handle the sudden weight of the situation. For a long moment, Marcus Grant stared at his daughter, then at Ethan. The emotion on his face was complicated, guilt, regret, and something else, something deeper. He had always been a man of strength, of control, and yet here, in this moment, he found himself lost. The man he had once deemed unworthy had become the very man to save his daughter's life. And now, the bond between Ethan and Sophia was undeniable. It was a painful realization for him to face. The night felt different after that moment, charged with the weight of what had passed and what might be yet to come. The next few days felt like a blur for Ethan. What had started as a simple, unassuming interaction in the hospital had now turned into something far more complicated. Sophia's recovery was moving along, but every moment between them carried a weight, an intensity that neither could ignore. She found ways to visit him at his apartment, standing awkwardly in the doorway at first, not sure how to bridge the gap between their pasts. But it was there, in the quiet moments they shared, that their connection deepened. Ethan would cook for her, simple meals like rice and stew, and Sophia would sit at the small kitchen table, watching it with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. They spoke little at first, only the occasional laugh breaking the silence as they shared stories of their childhoods. Ethan's growing up in a rough neighborhood, and Sophia's sheltered life in the military bubble where rules and discipline ruled every corner. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken words and unacknowledged desires. Ethan could feel it, the pull between them that neither of them dared to acknowledge, at least not aloud. There was longing in Sophia's gaze, a desire that matched his own but seemed too dangerous to explore. He had no right to feel this way about her. She was the daughter of the man who had ruined his career, his life. But when she was near, he felt something else stirring inside him. The warmth of her presence, the way her lips curved when she smiled, the soft sound of her voice when she said his name. All of it drew him in. And so they waited. They both waited for the other to make the first move. For a week, nothing changed, until one rainy evening, when Sophia arrived at his door again. This time, she wasn't standing awkwardly in the doorway, hesitant. Instead, she stepped inside confidently, a look of determination in her eyes. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice full of unspoken longing, "we can't keep doing this." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't realized how much he'd been waiting for her to say something, but now that she had, he was unsure how to respond. "Doing what?" he asked, his voice betraying his vulnerability. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the world outside faded into nothing. There was no General Grant, no past that haunted them both. Just the two of them, caught in this fragile moment. Sophia took a step closer, closing the distance between them, and placed her hand on his chest. Her fingers were warm against the fabric of his shirt, and he could feel the beat of her heart, matching his own. Then her voice trailed off, and for a moment she seemed uncertain. But then she took a deep breath, and in that instant, everything shifted. The air between them grew thick, charged with anticipation. "I don't care about your past," she said softly, her gaze unwavering. "I don't care about the mistakes that were made. I care about you. I want you, just as you are." The words, so simple yet so profound, hit Ethan like a wave crashing against the shore. He had spent years building walls around himself, afraid to feel anything for anyone, especially not for Sophia, whose father had destroyed him. But now, those walls were crumbling. Before he could respond, Sophia leaned in, closing the gap between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both testing the waters. But as the kiss deepened, so did the intensity of their feelings. Ethan pulled her closer, his hands moving to her back, pulling her body against his. The sensation of her warmth against him, the softness of her skin, made his pulse race. He had never wanted anyone like this before, not even the women he had once shared fleeting moments with in the past. But this, Sophia, this was different. She wasn't just a beautiful woman. She was the one person who had seen him for who he truly was, without the judgment or the anger. Their kiss broke only when they were both out of breath. Their bodies pressed against each other in a way that felt both unfamiliar and right. Sophia's fingers traced a line of his jaw, her touch light but electrifying. "I've wanted this for so long," she confessed, her voice a whisper against the skin. "I just didn't know how to ask." Ethan couldn't find the words. He had no idea how to explain the storm of emotions crashing through him. He had lived a life of duty, of sacrifice, but now, for the first time, he was standing at the edge of something that felt real, something that could heal all the wounds he had carried for so long. He kissed her again, this time with more urgency, as if he were claiming her, claiming the part of him he had buried for years. And when she responded, her hands threading through his hair, pulling him closer, he knew that nothing else mattered anymore. Not the past, not the lies, not the hurt, only this moment, only her. Marcus Grant, the father who had once destroyed Ethan, had been watching from a distance, his pride and shame growing with every passing day. The very man he had cast aside had saved his daughter, and now he found himself witnessing the blossoming connection between Ethan and Sophia, a connection he could not deny, no matter how much he tried to suppress it. It was painful. The guilt he had lived with for so many years surged to the surface, and he knew that in the depths of his heart, he had to make things right. He couldn't undo the wrongs of the past, but he could help heal the present. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations, both for Marcus and Ethan. They spoke about the past, the bitterness, the mistakes, the forgiveness that neither of them had thought possible. But it was through their shared efforts to heal the wounds between them that a new bond began to form, one built not on duty or power, but on mutual respect and a desire to move forward. As for Sophia and Ethan, their connection deepened with every stolen moment, every kiss, and every touch that promised more. They had both been broken in different ways, but in each other they found the pieces they had been missing. The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. Every moment with Sophia felt both like a dream and a painful reality. They had crossed a line, but something inside him told him this was real, that Sophia wasn't just a distraction or an answer to his loneliness. She was everything he had been searching for without even knowing it. Sophia, too, was different. Ethan wasn't just a man who would save her life. He was her redemption. The tenderness he showed, the care in his touch, the way he made her feel like she mattered in ways no one ever had. It all overwhelmed her. She had spent years in the shadow of her father's military career, expected to live up to his reputation, to be perfect. But Ethan was a man who saw her flaws, her vulnerabilities, and loved her despite them. It was late one night when the tension between them reached a boiling point. The city lights outside were dim, barely visible through the fog windows of Ethan's apartment. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken desires. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the silence. Sophia stood near the window, her back turned to him. Her reflection in the glass seemed like a distant image, a woman still lost in the past, unsure what to do with the feelings that consumed her since she met Ethan. Ethan was watching her, a familiar ache in his chest as he took in the sight of her. The way her shoulders slumped slightly in the stillness, the way her hair fell in soft waves around her face. It made him want to pull her close, to bury himself in her warmth. But he stayed where he was, not daring to make the first move. "Sophia," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "What are we doing here?" She didn't turn around, but he could hear the catch in her breath. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice breaking the silence. "I just know that I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something for you. Like you don't mean more to me than I've ever wanted to admit." Ethan stepped closer, his body moving toward her instinctively. His hand reached for her, but she turned before he could touch her, and in an instant, their lips were crashing together. The kiss was hungry, desperate, filled with everything they'd been holding back. The anger, the longing, the passion that had simmered beneath the surface for so long. Sophia's arms wrapped around Ethan, pulling him closer, as if trying to erase the distance between them. She had been fighting this, fighting the overwhelming desire she felt whenever she was near him. But now, in this moment, she couldn't stop herself. She needed him, needed this connection more than she had ever needed anything else. The kiss deepened, and Ethan felt a fire ignite inside him, a fire that he had long since buried. His hands moved over her body, feeling the soft curves of her hips, the warmth of her skin under his fingertips. Everything about her felt like home. Sophia's breath quickened as she responded to his touch, her hands slipping beneath his shirt, tracing the lines of his chest with gentle fingers. Every part of him wanted to take her, to claim her, to lose himself in the heat of her body, to forget everything but the two of them. But he pulled back for a moment, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet of the room. "I don't want to hurt you," he murmured, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't want to be just another mistake in your life." She shook her head, her hands gently cupping his face. "You're not a mistake, Ethan. You've never been. It's me who's been hiding, not you." She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation. Ethan let himself go, letting the heat between them consume him, as their bodies finally met with an urgency neither could deny. He lifted her effortlessly, his hand strong around her waist as he carried her to bed, his lips never leaving hers. The night became a blur of passion and tenderness, their bodies moving together in a rhythm that felt like destiny. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, raw, and vulnerable. They had both been broken in different ways, but now, in this intimate moment, they were healing together. The morning light filtered through the window, soft and golden, casting a warm glow over the room. Sophia woke first, her head resting against Ethan's chest, her fingers tracing the lines of his bare skin. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For once, everything felt right. Ethan stirred, his arm tightening around her instinctively as he woke, a content smile tugging at his lips. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. Words were unnecessary. What mattered was the way she was looking at him, the way she fit against him like she was meant to be there. Sophia smiled softly, tracing a finger along his jaw. "Do you think this could work?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "After everything that's happened, with my father, with your past, can we be what we want to be?" Ethan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I don't know, but I do know that I'm here, now, and you're here, and that's all that matters." Her smile grew, and she leaned in to kiss him again, tenderly, a promise of something new, something real. In that moment, The past felt like a distant memory. The future was still uncertain, but they had each other. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. In the days that followed, Ethan and Sophia's bond only deepened. Marcus Grant, despite the emotional weight of his past mistakes, could no longer deny the connection between them. He watched from a distance as his daughter and the man who had once been discarded by the world began to rebuild their lives together. It was painful for him, but also necessary. Marcus had to let go of the past, and in doing so, he found the courage to ask for forgiveness, not just from Ethan, but from himself. The redemption he sought wasn't going to come easily, but it was a start. The days blurred into weeks, and Ethan and Sophia found solace in each other's arms. They were no longer bound by the chains of their past. They had found something new. The warmth of their bond grew stronger with every passing moment, and for once, Ethan believed in the possibility of something beautiful and lasting. As the weeks passed, Ethan and Sophia began to settle into a new rhythm. Their lives, once shaped by isolation and heartache, were now intertwined by something deeper than either of them had expected. Their connection had started out as an unexpected spark, a flicker of desire in the midst of chaos. But now, it had become a fire, something they both knew they couldn't ignore. Every moment they shared, whether it was quiet mornings spent in each other's arms or stolen kisses in dimly lit hallways, brought them closer. Ethan began to see Sophia not as the daughter of the man who had destroyed him, but as the woman who had fought through her own battles and survived. She wasn't just his redemption. She was his equal, his partner in every sense of the word. But their journey was far from over. One evening, as Ethan was returning from a long day of work, he found Sophia sitting by the window, staring out into the night. The soft glow of the streetlights cast a peaceful, golden light over her, but there was something in her expression, something distant. Ethan walked over quietly, his fingers grazed in the back of her neck before gently tilting her chin to face him. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away, her eyes searching his. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice hesitant, "about what happens next. After everything. After you saved my life, after all the things we've shared, how do we move forward?" Ethan's heart swelled at her words, at the vulnerability in her voice. She was asking the question that had been on both of their minds for weeks. They had stepped into a new world together, one where the past was no longer the weight that held them down. But even now, the uncertainty of the future lingered. "I don't have all the answers," Ethan replied, his thumb lightly brushing her cheek. "But I know I'm here, with you, and that's enough for me." Sophia smiled, the warmth in her eyes melting the last remnants of doubt. "It's enough for me, too," she whispered, as she reached up to kiss him, slowly, tenderly, like it was the first kiss they had ever shared, and the most important one at that. The days that followed brought them both closer. Ethan started to feel like he was finally living again, not just surviving, but truly living for the first time in years. Sophia had shown him a love that was gentle and fierce, patient and consuming. But as they began to heal, Marcus Grant, still reeling from the realization that the man he had cast aside was now the very man who had saved his daughter, began to wrestle with his own redemption. He couldn't ignore the growing connection between Ethan and Sophia, the way his daughter's eyes lit up whenever she spoke of him. It was a bittersweet thing, watching the bond between them grow, and Marcus knew that his place in Sophia's life was slowly being replaced by someone else. For weeks, Marcus stayed in the background, watching from a distance. He had seen his own mistakes, the way his pride had cost him everything. Now he was ready to admit it, to both Ethan and himself. It was on a crisp, clear afternoon when Marcus finally decided to face what he'd been avoiding. He stood at Ethan's doorstep, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The air was cold, but his heart felt even colder as he knocked. Ethan opened the door, surprise flashing across his face. There was no anger in his eyes, no bitterness, just calm, steady understanding. "General," Ethan said, his voice cautious but not unkind. Marcus looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "I need to talk to you, Ethan," he said, his voice strained. "I've spent too long running from the truth, and I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you my gratitude. You saved my daughter's life, and I can never repay you for that." Ethan stepped aside, gesturing for Marcus to come in. "Come inside," he said quietly. "We can talk." They sat across from each other, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them, but also a sense of new beginnings. The awkwardness of the past few years was gone. Marcus had faced his own guilt, his pride, and now it was time for them both to move forward. "I've failed you, Ethan," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I made the worst mistake of my life. But I've realized something, how much you've sacrificed, and how much you've had to endure. You didn't deserve any of it." Ethan listened, his expression unreadable, but his heart softened at Marcus's words. This was a redemption he'd been waiting for, an apology that was long overdue. But in this moment, he knew that forgiveness wasn't just something he had to give. It was something they both had to work for. "I don't need your apology," Ethan said, his voice steady. "What I needed was for you to see me. See who I was, not just who you thought I was." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding. "I do see you now. And I promise you, Ethan, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." The next few months were a time of change for all of them. Ethan and Sophia grew even closer, their bond strengthening with each passing day. Marcus made good on his promise, advocating for Ethan's return to medical field, clearing his name once and for all. And in the end, as Ethan and Sophia stood together at the grand opening of the Grant Center for Integrative Medicine, they both knew the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. They had faced their past, confronted their fears, and together they had found something beautiful. Marcus, standing beside them, looked at them both with pride. His daughter had found the love and strength she needed, and Ethan had finally found a redemption he deserved. The love that had once seemed impossible was now a reality. Ethan and Sophia had built a life together, not just a moment, but for the future. And as they walked into that future, they walked hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next together.